the billionaire who told the world to be quiet, until he heard the maid's voice. After years of silence and solitude, a man scarred by loss rediscovers the sound of life through the voice of a young housekeeper who turns his home and his heart into a refuge of hope. Subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The kitchen clock struck 7 when Naomi Ellis rang the bell of the Ward mansion for the first time. The iron gate opened slowly, revealing a path of stone slick with mist and a vast, cold house made of marble and glass. Boston was just waking outside, but inside those walls, silence felt like a rule, not a circumstance. Mrs. Grant, the housekeeper, appeared at the door wearing a spotless apron and the weary look of someone who'd seen too many people give up. "You're the new one?" she asked, her skepticism plain. Naomi nodded, clutching the worn handbag she'd carried since she was 17, when she first started working. "Let me warn you now, girl. He's demanding, impatient, and has no mercy. 5 quit just this week." The words didn't make her flinch. She needed the job, not out of choice, but duty. Her grandmother Evelyn required care and medication, and the hospital no longer accepted promises. Naomi took a deep breath, wiped her palms on the hem of her new uniform, and stepped inside. The floor gleamed like glass. Chandeliers sparkled, and every painting seemed to watch whoever dared to cross the corridor. The house didn't smell like home. It smelled like absence. Elliot Ward was in the library, as always, turned away from the world. The soft clatter of keys and the hum of machines were the only sounds he allowed. Since the accident, the mansion had become a fortress of unbroken routines and measured distances. His electric wheelchair moved with precision. No creaks, no sound, no emotion. He didn't look up when Mrs. Grant announced a new employee. "Another one?" he muttered, still typing. "Yes, sir. Says she needs a job." Elliot gave a humorless half-smile. They all say that. Finally, he turned around. 42, sharp features, trim beard, hard eyes. Simple rules. Strict schedule. Nothing out of place. And above all, silence. "I can't stand noise." Naomi nodded respectfully, not backing down. He studied her for a few seconds, as if measuring how long she'd last. "Start with the East Wing. The cleaning's done before noon." He turned back to his monitor. Naomi gave a small bow and left, her steps light, measured, obedient. From the top of the stairs, Mrs. Grant whispered, "Good luck, girl. He never listens to anyone." Naomi murmured back, "Maybe no one's spoken at the right time," and disappeared down the hall. The work began. The East Wing was a maze of unused rooms, cold corridors, family portraits, and shrouded furniture. Naomi moved carefully, conserving her energy as she dusted shelves, wiped glass, and changed sheets. The sound of cloth against surface was the only sign of life in that space. At times, the stillness threatened to swallow her, but she remembered her grandmother's voice. "When the world feels heavy, sing softly and it will hear you." Without noticing, she began to hum a tune, an old, gentle melody, almost childish. It was a song about hope, one Evelyn had taught her when she still believed the future could be light. The notes drifted like a whisper, filling the void between the walls. Naomi kept working, not thinking, letting the sound keep her company. Downstairs, Elliot lifted his head. For a moment, he thought he'd imagined it. He pressed a button to turn off the air conditioner, and the sound grew clearer, a woman's voice, pure, simple. Not loud enough to annoy him, just different. He frowned and told himself to ignore it, but he couldn't. The song haunted him for hours, even after it stopped. When the clock struck noon, he realized he hadn't shouted once. In the kitchen, Mrs. Grant watched Naomi work. The young woman washed utensils with care, organized the cabinets, and somehow made the air feel lighter. "You sing," the housekeeper remarked, not accusing, just observing. Naomi blushed. "Sorry, it's a habit. I didn't even notice." Mrs. Grant dried her hands and glanced toward the ceiling, as if listening to old memories. "He hates music. Has ever since, well, before you came." Naomi only nodded, storing the information without promising silence. That afternoon, Elliot passed the hallway and saw her in the inner courtyard, sweeping dry leaves. The wind lifted strands of her tied hair, and she was singing again, softly, without an audience. He stopped at the doorway, watching. It was irritating. It was beautiful. It was human, and that unsettled him. He returned to his office, tried to convince himself it was insubordination, though a quiet part of him knew it was something else, memory. When Grace was still alive, she sang every Sunday on that same veranda, and her voice had been the center of his world. After the accident, the music disappeared from the house, and with it, everything that made him feel. Night fell slowly over Boston. The light rain tapping against the glass sounded like a natural metronome, marking the rhythm of the hours. Naomi finished her shift and put away the supplies. Mrs. Grant handed her the day's pay and said, "He didn't complain about anything. That's a miracle." Naomi smiled. "Maybe he's getting used to me." The housekeeper gave a brief, disbelieving laugh. No one gets used to him. Upstairs, Elliot watched the scene to the cameras, annoyed by his own interest. The image of her walking out into the drizzle stirred something unfamiliar. He closed the laptop and sat still, listening to the faint echo of a song that no longer existed. Naomi's voice mixed with the rain outside, and that combination made it impossible to work. The silence that had always been his comfort now felt unbearably heavy. He grabbed the remote and turned on the TV just to fill the emptiness, but nothing sounded right. The human sound had replaced the mechanical, and though he wouldn't admit it, he missed it. Hours later, the clock read 2 a.m, and the mansion was still awake. Elliot rolled his chair across the dark library, unable to sleep. The books were perfectly aligned, the papers in order, life under control, but something inside him was off. He opened a drawer and pulled out a framed photo covered with a sheet of paper. In it, Grace smiled at the piano, her hands hovering over the keys. The sound of that memory was louder than any real melody. He closed his eyes, and instinctively, Naomi's voice replayed in his head, singing the same fragment he'd heard hours earlier. The memory was comforting, almost peaceful, and he hated that. He shoved the photo away and turned off the lights. In the darkness, silence returned, but it wasn't the same. A small crack had formed in the wall he built around himself. And through that crack, without him realizing, a new sound began to enter, a sound that didn't ask for permission. It simply existed. The sun had barely risen when Naomi arrived at the mansion for the second time. The garden was still blanketed in fog, and the iron gate creaked like a warning. Mrs. Grant opened the door with a look of genuine surprise. No one ever came back after the first day. "You actually returned," she muttered. "I promised myself I'd stay until they told me to leave," Naomi replied, adjusting her gloves. The floor gleamed the same as before, cold, flawless, and the silence felt even heavier. She walked down the hallway with light steps, aware of Elliot's invisible gaze through the cameras. In his office, he watched every move on the monitor, convinced this woman would be just another name on his long list of dismissed employees. But when he saw her methodically organizing the cleaning cabinet, humming softly as if rocking a thought to sleep, something unsettled him. That voice wasn't defiance. It was habit. It was life insisting on existing in a place that had forgotten what sound was. He turned off the monitor in irritation, yet the melody lingered, slipping through the walls like a scent, delicate, impossible to contain. Naomi worked the entire day without interruption. Mrs. Grant, however, watched her with unease. "He's going to hear you," she warned in a low voice. "And if he does, he won't like it." Naomi only smiled faintly and kept cleaning. There was something in her, a mix of discipline and lightness, a rare ability to stay present without being ruled by fear. Sometimes, as she scrubbed the steps or swept the hallway, her voice would rise in short verses, like an old whisper carried from the past. She sang songs her grandmother Evelyn had taught her, simple lyrics about rain and harvest, about time and the things that grow again. When she finished a task, she would quietly say thank you, as if to someone who wasn't there. Elliot noticed the house beginning to change. The air felt less stagnant. The dust had lifted. Even the glass seemed brighter. His irritation grew not because of the sound, but because he liked it. That contradiction consumed him. He instructed Mrs. Grant to give Naomi a new list, long, absurd, almost impossible to finish before dinner. The list was cruel, A full cleaning of the library, furniture polishing, rearranging the paintings by artist and year. Naomi glanced at the paper, unfazed. "That's a lot for one day," Mrs. Grant said. "He's doing it on purpose." "Then I'll do it on purpose, too," Naomi answered calmly and got to work. The sun climbed high as she stood on the ladder, reaching for the top shelves, her cloth moving in steady circles, humming all the while. Elliot entered without warning and watched her. "You think this is a performance?" he asked coldly. Naomi descended slowly. "No, sir. It's just how I work. Work requires silence. Absolute silence kills concentration." Her tone was respectful but firm, and that disarmed him. Elliot didn't know what to say. He stood there for a moment, watching her climb back up and continue, her hands moving to the rhythm of a melody he didn't recognize. He left the room without another word, but the song followed him, caught somewhere in his mind. By late afternoon, the air in the house felt different. Mrs. Grant noticed it immediately. "Haven't seen him this quiet in ages," she said to Thomas, the driver. "He's thinking too much," the man replied, pouring coffee. Elliot sat in his office, fingers still on the keyboard, his head replaying that voice over and over. Grace had sung too, but her memory carried pain, loss, a final note he never accepted. Naomi's voice was different. It didn't demand anything. It didn't challenge him. It simply existed, and that was what disarmed him the most. He decided to test her limits. He called Mrs. Grant. "Tomorrow, have her clean all the exterior windows." Alone. The housekeeper hesitated. "There are 48, sir." "Exactly. Let's see how far she goes." He hung up and took a deep breath. He knew she wouldn't manage it. Maybe when she finally lost her composure, that unsettling calm her voice brought would disappear too. It was a logical plan, but deep down, it was a desperate attempt to stop something that was making him feel again. Naomi left the mansion as the sky darkened. Her fingers ached, her shoulders throbbed, but her expression stayed serene. Mrs. Grant walked her to the gate. "I don't understand how you manage not to get rattled." Naomi paused for a moment. "Life doesn't give me the luxury of stopping at the stones, ma'am. When I stumble, I sing. That's what my grandmother always said." The housekeeper watched her fade into the misty street and felt a lump rise in her throat. Inside, Elliot was still watching through the security system. The sight of the young woman disappearing into the fog stirred an unease he couldn't name. He closed the laptop, but her voice lingered in the air, echoing between objects. He wheeled himself to the piano, covered under its sheet, and stood before it, motionless. The instrument had become the symbol of everything he'd buried. On instinct, he lifted the fabric and pressed a single key. The note rang out, weak, cracked, but real. Too quickly, he covered it again and backed away, frustrated with himself. The sound had returned, and he didn't know whether he wanted to hear it. The rest of the night stretched out in silence, but it wasn't the same silence as before. Elliot wandered the dark corridors of the mansion, listening to the echo of his own thoughts. Voices in the past drifted in and out, tangled with the fresh memory of a calm song that refused to fade. He sat in the library, staring at the unlit fireplace, and realized something had changed in the rhythm of his breathing. He didn't like to admit it, but he was waiting for the sound, waiting for the moment when the next day, the house would once again be filled with that melody that both irritated and soothed him. In his room, Grace's portrait rested on the dresser. He turned it face down and switched off the light. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the wind swept away the last leaves in the garden. In the dark, Elliot replayed the fragment of Naomi's song in his mind. His body relaxed against the chair, his eyes closing slowly, and the man who once controlled everything finally let sleep come, not because he wanted to, but because there was no longer enough silence to stop it. The morning began with sunlight streaming through the tall glass panes, illuminating tiny dust particles that seemed to dance in the air. Naomi arrived right on time, as always, and slipped into her pale uniform, which made her look almost invisible against the cold grandeur of the house. The routine was as meticulous as ever, yet something felt different. A lighter air, a faint floral scent that Mrs. Grant couldn't remember noticing in years. From his office, Elliot watched everything through the monitors, pretending it was out of vigilance, though it was more habit than necessity. He told himself it was about control, but even he wasn't sure anymore if that was true. He watched Naomi move with a calmness that unsettled him. As she cleaned the stairs, she sang softly, her voice drifting through the hallway like a thread of light cutting through marble. With each note, a fragment of the old silence seemed to dissolve. From a distance, Mrs. Grant whispered to Thomas, "The house feels different." The driver replied, "She's different." Elliot heard the exchange through the intercom and switched it off, irritated at himself for silently agreeing. By noon, Naomi had been assigned a new task, cleaning all the windows in the main hall, both inside and out. They were tall, heavy glass panels that required extra effort. This time, Elliot chose to watch her in person. He entered the room quietly, stopping a few feet away, just to see what his presence would do. Naomi stayed focused, wiping the glass with slow, steady movements. The sunlight reflected against her face, outlining her features in pale gold. Elliot cleared his throat, stopped singing. "I can't stand noise." The words came out more as a reflex than an order. Naomi paused, met his eyes, and replied in a gentle yet steady tone, "Sir, sometimes noise is what keeps people alive." The sentence hung in the air for a few seconds. Elliot stared at her, surprised by her composure, but found no words. He simply turned his chair around and left. From the doorway, Mrs. Grant covered her mouth, certain the young woman would be fired before the day was over. Naomi returned to work, not angry, not shaken, just calm, as if her peace came from a place no one else could reach. The afternoon stretched on, and the sun cast a warm glow across the polished floor, as if reminding the house that the world still existed outside. Exhausted, Naomi was finishing the last window when Mrs. Grant appeared. "You should take a break, dear." "I'll rest later, ma'am. These windows need to see the daylight." The housekeeper frowned, puzzled. "See the daylight? They've been closed for too long." The comment sounded simple, but lingered in the air like an unintended metaphor. Mrs. Grant didn't insist and walked away. From the corridor, Elliot overheard the phrase. He stopped instinctively, looking at his own reflection in one of the newly cleaned windows. For a moment, he saw himself as he once was, standing tall, confident, easy laughter in his face. The image vanished when his chair moved, and the flash of memory struck him like a blow. He looked away and rolled toward his office, not realizing he had left his phone on a side table. When Naomi finished, she found it and carefully placed it on a shelf, resisting any curiosity. She hummed a short tune while putting away her cleaning supplies. Upstairs, Elliot heard the echo and froze. The melody was about starting over. He didn't know the lyrics, but he recognized the feeling. When night fell, silence returned, but not the same kind. The walls of the mansion, once rigid, seemed to hold a faint murmur now, a blend of voice, water, and wind. Elliot rolled slowly down the corridors toward the kitchen. As he approached, he heard Naomi again. This song was sad, but touched with a sweetness that refused to yield to melancholy. The lyrics spoke of someone who kept planting seeds even when the ground seemed barren. He stopped at the doorway, unseen by her. She stood at the sink washing dishes, her hair tied up, her movement steady, her whole body in rhythm with her work. Her voice filled the room effortlessly. For a few seconds, time seemed suspended. The memory of Grace came back like a breath. She too used to sing while cooking, but Grace's voice had faded more each day, while Naomi seemed to rekindle what was lost. Elliot turned his chair to leave, but couldn't. He stayed there until the last note. That night, alone in his room, Elliot couldn't escape the memories. Her voice and Grace's intertwined in his mind as if part of the same song. He grabbed the remote for the cameras and replayed the day's recordings. There was Naomi, cleaning, singing, repeating small, deliberate movements with serenity that defied explanation. He fast-forwarded to the moment she looked at the window and said something the microphones hadn't caught. He tried to guess what it was. When he couldn't, he invented a reason. Maybe she was talking to herself, maybe to her grandmother, maybe thanking someone unseen. Whatever it was, there was too much tenderness in the way she moved. He turned off the screens and sat there in the dark, thinking that the world should have stopped at that exact moment, before the accident, before the loss, before Grace's death. But the world hadn't stopped. It kept going, and now sound was finding its way back into him through the voice of a stranger. The next morning, Elliot ordered the sound from the kitchen cameras to be shut off. He claimed it was a waste of energy, that no one needed to hear the staff talking. Mrs. Grant understood perfectly, but said nothing. She simply obeyed. Unknowingly, Naomi had just been given the freedom to keep singing, and she did. As she washed, dusted, and swept, her voice spread through the house with ease. The once frozen corridors began to feel warm again. Even the sound of Elliot's wheels no longer echoed sharply against the floor. Without realizing it, the mansion was beginning to breathe in rhythm with her. As Mrs. Grant changed the flowers in the hallway, she murmured, "That girl's got something good in her hands." Elliot heard it and didn't correct her. He simply kept observing from afar, torn between logic and a feeling he couldn't name. Psychologists, pills, therapy, none of it had ever brought sound back into his life. But now, a single simple song drifting up from the kitchen was enough to make silence stop feeling safe. And that frightened him more than any pain ever could. Rain fell softly over the mansion's roof when Naomi stepped into the music room for the first time. The place felt suspended in time. The air was cold, the floor still marked where furniture once stood, and a white sheet draped over a grand piano, large, solemn, like a sleeping ghost. Naomi watched the fabric flutter faintly with the breeze coming through the half-open windows. She approached carefully, wiping dust from the surrounding furniture. The damp cloth slid across the wood, releasing that bittersweet scent of age. Mrs. Grant had never brought her to this room. It was the only one in the house that remained unlit. Still, there was a calm presence there, almost reverent. Naomi's eyes lingered on the sheet, and, moved by impulse, she lifted one corner. The glossy black surface of the piano reflected the room around her, despite the dust. The yellowed keys seemed to call her silently. She hesitated, took a deep breath, and pressed one key with her fingertips. The note came out rough, out of tune but alive. Another touch brought a second tone. The echo drifted across the room and climbed the staircase, as if the house itself had stopped to listen. Elliot heard it. Upstairs, he was reviewing reports when the sound struck him like something foreign yet painfully familiar. He froze mid-sentence, pen suspended in the air, his heart racing in a rhythm he hadn't felt in years. That single, imperfect note carried the weight of memory that hadn't asked permission to return. He turned his chair toward the corridor and heard it again, 2 notes, 3, forming the faint outline of a melody. The sound came from the music room, the one he'd ordered sealed since Grace's death. His body moved before his mind could stop it. He pushed his chair forward, speeding down the hall. With every meter, the music grew clearer. Grace's voice echoed faintly in his memory, but it wasn't her. When he reached the door, he found Naomi sitting at the piano, playing softly, unaware of being watched. The sight hit him like a blow. "Who told you to touch that?" The question came out louder than he intended. Naomi jumped, turning quickly, her hand still hovering over the keys. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know." Her voice was small but sincere. Elliot took a long breath, holding back something between anger and pain. "It's hers," he said quietly, avoiding her gaze. "My wife's." The silence that followed was thick enough to fill the entire room. Naomi lowered her eyes, realizing she had touched something deeper than an instrument. "She used to play?" she asked softly, not out of curiosity but respect. Elliot's eyes stayed fixed on the keys. His voice dropped. She sang, until she stopped. That final word fell heavy like a stone. Naomi sensed the unspoken weight behind it, but didn't push further. She stood and pulled the sheet back over the piano, letting the fabric fall gently over the keys. "Maybe the piano's still waiting," she murmured, stepping back. Elliot stayed motionless, watching the cloth settle. When she left, he exhaled slowly, as if the air itself had grown too heavy. Alone now, he stared at the white sheet, the sound of those few notes still echoing in his mind. Time seemed to have rolled back to the day Grace closed the piano and never opened again. His hands trembled, not from anger, but from memory. The rain thickened outside, streaking the windows like silent tears. Elliot stayed in the room for a long time, debating whether to have the door locked again. In the end, he didn't. He ran his hand along the piano lid, feeling the grain of wood beneath the layer of dust. The faint scent of Grace's perfume still lingered there. It was impossible to stand in that room and not see her. The neatly pinned hair, the curve of her back over the keys, the voice that had once filled the house on sunny afternoons. She used to sing simple melodies from old films, laughing every time she missed a note. After the accident, that laughter vanished. Music became silence, and silence became the cruelest form of memory. Elliot closed his eyes, and for a fleeting moment, he wished to hear any sound again, any sound that wasn't his own breathing. But he didn't move his hands. When he finally left, he looked back and saw the sheet sway gently, as if someone were still sitting there, playing. Naomi spent the rest of the day in silence. She cleaned the halls, washed the floors, prepared Elliot's dinner without humming a single tune. The housekeeper noticed a change. "Something happened?" she asked. Naomi answered carefully, "I played a piano that should have stayed closed." Mrs. Grant sighed. "Mr. Elliot doesn't talk about her. No one does." The conversation ended there, but Naomi kept thinking about the words spoken, and the ones that weren't. By the time her shift ended, she walked toward the gate with her body tired but her thoughts light. The rain had stopped, and the cool air carried the scent of the garden's flowers. She glanced toward the music room windows, still lit, and thought she saw a shadow move inside. She pulled her coat tighter and left, unaware that Elliot hadn't gone to bed. He was back in that room, alone, sitting before the covered piano. Time had frozen, and the silence dared him to break it. With a hesitant motion, Elliot pulled the sheet away again. The keys gleamed under the faint light of the lamp. He ran his hand over them, like greeting an old friend long forgotten. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and pressed a single key. The sound echoed to the room, soft, clear, without melody, but full of meaning. It was enough to break something inside him. The tears came without warning. They weren't of pain, but exhaustion. That sound felt like forgiveness. He stayed there, head bowed, letting the tears wash away the years that had stood still. Upstairs, Naomi was getting ready for bed when she heard the solitary echo drifting through the ceiling. She recognized the tone of the instrument and understood, without needing words, that something had shifted below. The house, which had only breathed until then, now had a heartbeat. And even without a full melody, that single note was the first measure of a new rhythm. Life at the mansion seemed to follow its usual rhythm, but something had changed in the way Naomi moved through it. Ever since she had heard that single note rise from the piano, she knew the house's heart had started beating again. And, as if protecting something fragile, she began caring for that room with a devotion that went beyond duty. She wiped the piano surface with damp cloths, polished the wax floor, changed the curtains so sunlight could enter once more. Sometimes, when the work was done, she would test a few notes. Never full songs, only fragments, as if afraid of startling the memory that lingered there. Mrs. Grant watched in silence. One afternoon, she mentioned that the Children's Hospital nearby was organizing a charity event and that years ago, the Ward Foundation had hosted it. But he canceled everything after Mrs. Grace passed, she said quietly. Naomi listened and instinctively felt that the silence demanded sound. That night, she recorded a simple melody on her phone, just voice and piano, and left a note that read, "Maybe the foundation needs a new song." The next morning, Elliot entered his office and found a note on his desk. The envelope was plain and signed. The attached file was simply labeled song.mp3. He put on his headphones and hesitated for a few seconds before pressing play. Naomi's voice filled his ears, delicate, pure, accompanied by trembling piano notes. The song spoke of beginnings, of doors opening again. Elliot tore off the headphones, furious, his face burning. He took it as provocation, an intrusion into the silence he still called his own. Then he played it again. And again, the anger faded into confusion, and confusion into a tightening in his chest. It wasn't defiance. It was hope. He sat in silence for a long while, staring at the note. Deep down, he knew Naomi was right. The foundation was mute. The house was mute. That night, without telling anyone, he reopened old charity files, checked budgets, donors, and schedules. Near midnight, He sent a message to Mrs. Grant. "Prepare the hall. We're expecting guests." When Mrs. Grant read the message the next morning, she thought her employer had lost his mind. "You want to open the main hall? It's been closed for 3 years. Then it's time to open it." Naomi, listening from the corridor, froze. "But the event, sir? There's no time to organize it." "There will be." That was all he said. Within days, gardeners, sound technicians, and decorators filled the mansion. Walls were scrubbed, chandeliers relit, and the dust of the past replaced with the scent of fresh flowers. Naomi worked quietly, driven by a blend of gratitude and fear. Sometimes she crossed paths with Elliot in the hallways. He would glance at her, not with a cold attachment before, but with a silent kind of recognition. Mrs. Grant handled the logistics, and the piano, newly restored, was placed back at the center of the room. Each day, Naomi passed by it, let her fingers brush the edge like greeting an old friend. None of them said it aloud, but they all knew the event wasn't just about charity. It was about giving sound back to the house. The morning of the event dawned clear, the garden gleaming under soft sunlight. Luxury cars lined the driveway one after another, and photographers crowded near the entrance. Journalists, doctors, volunteers, and old family friends arrived, curious to witness the Ward Foundation's return. Naomi, hidden among the staff, served drinks while her eyes darted nervously across the decorated tables. The hall looked transformed. Light sparkled through crystal chandeliers. Flowers burst in color, and the piano gleamed at the center, waiting. Elliot appeared last, wearing a dark suit, dignified in his chair, calm and composed. When the speeches began, no one knew what to expect. Mrs. Grant introduced him with a trembling voice. He took the microphone, and for a moment, silence filled the space. 3 years ago, this house went silent. He began, his deep voice resonating. Today, the sound again. The guests exchanged looks, uncertain. Then Elliot turned toward Naomi. "Miss Ellis, would you come here?" She froze, confused. "Sing," he said. The entire room turned to her. For a second, Naomi wanted to refuse. Her palms were sweating, her heart racing. "Sir, I can't." "Sing," he repeated, firm, leaving no room for hesitation. Mrs. Grant stepped closer, her eyes filled with encouragement. Naomi drew a shaky breath, walked to the piano, and sat down. Guests whispered, unsure who she was. The lights dimmed. The murmurs faded. The first notes sounded hesitant, then steadier, until her voice filled the room. It wasn't trained, but it was honest, pure, filled with truth. She sang about healing, about time and faith, about the sound that never truly dies. The hall, once made of glass and silence, began to vibrate with life. Some guests closed their eyes. Others wept without knowing why. Elliot sat motionless, his face bathed in warm light. When the song ended, the silence that followed was absolute, the kind that comes before something sacred. And then came the applause. Long, heartfelt, liberating. Naomi bowed her head, tears gathering, unsure whether to smile or cry. Elliot approached the piano and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "The sound is back." And with it, the part of me that was missing. The room erupted again in applause. Mrs. Grant wiped her tears discreetly, leaning on Thomas for support. Naomi rose slowly, eyes glistening, looking at Elliot without words. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic gestures, just truth. The silence had finally broken. The applause continued, and soon the hall filled with music again, this time from recordings echoing through every corridor. That night, when the last car drove away and the lights dimmed, Elliot remained alone in the hall, watching the piano. He pressed one key, then another, and realized the sound no longer hurt. Outside, a gentle wind stirred, carrying the hum of life back through the open windows. Upstairs, Naomi arranged the flowers, humming softly to herself. The sound drifted up the stairs, rising toward the high ceilings of the mansion. Music had returned, and with it, everything time could never take away. The months that followed brought a kind of movement no one thought they'd ever see again in that house. The name Ward Foundation returned to the headlines, but not for the money it raised. This time, it was for the lives it was changing. The main hall, once sealed off, had become a space for rehearsals, workshops, and small performances by young people in rehabilitation. Naomi, never claiming credit, helped organize everything, taught simple songs, and guided the students through their first chords. Elliot, always reserved, had started coming downstairs to watch. He'd sit quietly along the wall, his wheelchair by his side, observing as the voices intertwined in harmony. The sound that once irritated him now made him breathe deeper. Mrs. Grant used a joke that even the portraits on the walls seemed to smile again. With every new melody, Elliot saw pieces of himself reflected back. In the effort, the uncertainty, the hesitant courage of those learning to try again. It was a slow process, but a real one, as if the music were filling the empty spaces time had left behind. One afternoon, after class ended, Elliot asked Naomi to follow him to the library. The room, once a place of isolation, now smelled of new books and polished wood. He waited for her to come closer before speaking plainly. "I wanted to thank you. I don't know how to name what you've done, but since that song, I no longer think of silence as a refuge." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Now it's just the space between songs." Naomi smiled softly, like someone hearing what they already knew. "You just needed to listen again," she replied. They stayed quiet for a moment, but it wasn't the same quiet as before. It was peaceful, full of presence. Elliot turned his chair toward the window. In the garden, children ran under the spring sun, their laughter mingling with the distant strum of a guitar. The house that had once been the portrait of loneliness now pulsed with life. He turned back to Naomi and said, almost as a confession, "I think this is how she wants to see it." Naomi understood he was talking about grace. No more words were needed. There was peace. The project grew faster than anyone expected. Schools from neighboring towns began sending children with physical and emotional challenges to join the music classes. The foundation expanded its funding, created scholarships, and purchased new instruments. Naomi became the coordinator of artistic activities, and Elliot became the public face of this new chapter. Photos of him on social media showed a different man, the same steady gaze, but with something gentler behind it. He never spoke of miracles, only of work, sound, and rebuilding. Mrs. Grant, who had seen it all unfold, said she'd never seen the mansion so alive. "Now it has a heartbeat," she'd say. At night, after everyone left, Naomi would stay behind to tidy the hall. Sometimes Elliot would appear, holding a cup of coffee, and they'd talk about old songs, the melodies that had marked their youth. There were no speeches of gratitude, no formalities. Just two people who had learned that sound can mend even what seemed lost. Months later, the mansion's garden turned into the stage for the foundation's first charity festival. The grounds glowed with lights and colorful ribbons, filled with children laughing, running, singing. The piano, now uncovered, stood proudly beneath a white canopy at the center of the lawn. Naomi directed everything, distributing sheet music and encouraging each young performer. Elliot watched from his chair in the shade of the trees. Calm and composed, a different man from the one who once banished sound from his life. When the concert began, the children's voices rose into the air, blending into a soft, spontaneous harmony. The melody was simple, but it carried the weight of truth. The audience, parents, teachers, volunteers, listened with emotion. Naomi sang along, her gentle voice guiding the choir. Elliot watched her, needing no words. The breeze carried the sound across the property, and for a moment, even the old walls seemed to keep time. Music was no longer an event. It had become part of the house itself. After the concert, Elliot asked that the piano remain outside. "It should stay where everyone can hear it," he said. His request was honored. From that day on, the children used it during their lessons, and even on ordinary afternoons, improvising melodies that drifted through the garden. Naomi moved among them, adjusting their posture, correcting notes with patience, and sometimes simply watching. The sound was imperfect but constant, and Elliot realized that's what he loved. The kind of life that didn't follow a perfect rhythm but still went on. One afternoon, a 9-year-old girl played the same sequence of notes Naomi had recorded months earlier, without even knowing it. Elliot smiled, recognizing the echo of the song that had changed everything. "It stayed," he murmured to himself. Mrs. Grant overheard him and understood instantly. The sound had stayed. It lingered in the walls, the furniture, and in the hearts of those who passed through. The final scene opens the mansion at sunset. The garden glows golden, and the windows reflect the fading light of the day. Children run and laugh. A small group plays violins, and Naomi sings with them, surrounded by joy. Elliot watches from afar, his gaze calm, the look of a man who has finally learned to listen to the world. The camera pulls back, revealing the full house. Once silent, now alive with notes and voices. The sound of the wind mingles with the children's song, light and continuous. The man who once told the world to be quiet had learned that silence, too, can be part of the music. And in the final image, as the echo of the melody fades into the evening air, one truth remains. The sound stayed, because when something true is born, not even time can silence it. The end. So, what did you think of this story? Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to keep enjoying stories like this one. See you next time.